On 5 News, permission for takeoff is granted. Now fasten your seatbelts for the storm. A third runway at Heathrow Airport is approved by the government, sparking a revolt among its own MPs. One of them is set to quit, while Boris Johnson says the plans are likely to be stopped.
Heathrow in the long term is not in the right place, and I'm afraid a third runway is undeliverable.
Also on the programme, the demolition of the jungle migrant camp in Calais gets underway. Horror in Australia, 4 people are killed on a theme park ride. And is it the end of the Essex girl, the campaign to get the phrase taken out of the dictionary? Hello and welcome to 5 News. I'm Matt Barbett. It's a decision which has been debated, delayed and has caused controversy for years. But now the government's finally approved plans for a third runway at Heathrow Airport. Hundreds of homes will be demolished. It will cost the taxpayer billions of pounds, and there are concerns over the environmental damage. But the Prime Minister said the decision to expand Britain's biggest airport will benefit ordinary working people. The Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, disagrees, and Conservative MP Zac Goldsmith is so convinced it's a bad idea, he's set to resign in protest. Our political editor, Andy Bell, has the story.
Heathrow is cleared to get bigger. The government's rejected Gatwick and instead says the best way to connect to world markets, boost trade and create jobs is to add a third runway here.
This is a momentous step for our country. The decisions taken earlier today, which I shall outline in a moment, are long overdue, but will serve our country for generations to come.
The claim is this expansion will add £61 billion to the economy eventually and create 77,000 jobs. Theresa May has taken a decision delayed by at least 3 of her predecessors. But there's plenty of opposition, even inside her own cabinet. Boris Johnson, her Foreign Secretary, once said he'd lie down in front of the bulldozers to stop Heathrow expansion, and he's still unhappy about it.
I'm afraid to say, I think that Heathrow in the long term is not in the right place, and I'm afraid a third runway is undeliverable.
And this MP is about to resign to force a by-election as a protest.
It's wrong because of the million people who will directly suffer on the back of the environmental harm this project unavoidably produces, and doomed because the complexities, the costs, the legal complications mean that this project is almost certainly not going to be delivered.
It's almost unheard of for ministers to be allowed to disagree on a big decision like this. So how far will someone like Boris Johnson be allowed to go?
Boris has already stated his opposition, and I don't expect him to spend all of the next few months, when there are many difficult issues to deal with around the world, campaigning on Heathrow.
So he should now just keep quiet?
It's not a question of him keeping quiet. He's part of a team. We respect the difference of opinion, but we are united as an airports committee. There is an overwhelming majority in Parliament that says this decision is the right one for Britain.
The decision may have been taken, but the protests will not go away. There are huge concerns about pollution, noise pollution and damage to the environment. This project is one step closer, but it still has to take off. Andy Bell, 5 News.
So we know what the politicians are saying, but what is it going to look like? Well, here's Heathrow today. That has 2 runways, north and south, and the third one is going to be immediately above them. That would allow 260,000 more flights every year. But to make space for that, 783 homes will be demolished, and the M25 motorway will be routed through a new tunnel. Harmondsworth will be one of 3 villages partly flattened to clear the path. Our chief correspondent Tessa Chapman has been speaking to the people who live there.
People in Harmondsworth call their village a little oasis, a piece of old England nestled next to Heathrow. They're used to the noise, many have lived with it for generations, but they will fight expansion every step of the way.
And the new boundary fence will be 54 paces from our front door.
The runway would be built at the end of Neil Keveran's front garden. He feels betrayed by David Cameron, who vowed it wouldn't happen.
We've made life choices based on that decision. Where to lay your loved ones to rest, where to scatter your loved ones to ashes, where to send your children to school, how much to borrow. Lots of life choices based on the promise of a Prime Minister.
Neil's daughter's school would be bulldozed, along with 800 homes here, like Armel Thomas's. Last year, she and her husband received a letter saying their house would be demolished if expansion got the go-ahead. She's convinced the stress contributed to his death weeks later.
He might have been frailed, but he wasn't dying. He just gave up. He realised that there was nothing else he could do, and actually by dying he was giving me the freedom to fight for this village, for my community and for his legacy.
Yes. What would your father say? Theresa May! And she's not alone. Some campaigners are fearful for the environment, others their homes and livelihoods.
You know, people feel very strongly about this, and you know, people power is something that, you know, Great Britain has been built on, and I don't think we're going to give up. I know we're not going to give up, and we are going to continue.
Harmondsworth Village is a conservation area. There are buildings here, like this church, that date back to medieval times. As one local resident told me, they didn't move into Heathrow's back garden, Heathrow moved into theirs. This battle between neighbours is about to become even more bitter.
Well, Tessa's live at Heathrow now, and Andy is in Westminster for us as well. Tessa, first, it's not just the people you spoke to in Harmondsworth, of course, who are going to be affected if this third runway goes ahead.
You're right, Matt. The nearby village of Longford would disappear from the map completely, and campaigners say in Sipsham thousands of homes would become completely uninhabitable due to pollution and noise concerns. The so-called noise footprint from Heathrow would extend well into West London and all the way out to Maidenhead as well. Going back to Harmondsworth, though, those residents I spoke to today whose homes would be demolished were told by Chris Grayling today they would be compensated for the market value of their home plus 25%. Few I spoke to were keen on that, though, and many pointed out that the market value has been suppressed in recent years due to uncertainty. One thing's for sure, though, they are going to carry on fighting here. I've seen anger today and sadness, but most of all defiance.
Andy, plenty of opposition then where Tessa is, and even more in that place behind you.
Yes, Matt, there is an awfully long way to go still on this. There has been a decision, but you now have a year of consultation before a vote will be taken in Parliament sometime at the end of next year, where this project has to clear both the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And assuming it gets through that, and there will clearly be a number of people rebelling on the Conservative side, but assuming it gets through that, you then get into a fully fledged planning process where there are lots of people, lots of organisations who still want to make sure that Heathrow does not go ahead. Just to give you one example, 4 Conservative-controlled councils are thinking of mounting and getting ready to mount a legal challenge. One of those councils is Maidenhead, which is the constituency of the Prime Minister. So still a long way to go on this, but a decision has been taken today, a decision that many would argue has been a long time coming.
Andy, thanks very much indeed. To the day's other news now, and the French authorities have begun demolishing the migrant camp in Calais known as the Jungle. For 2 days, thousands of people have been queuing to leave. They've been put on buses to reception centres across France. But as night falls and the bulldozers move in, there are increasing concerns over the number of children who are still inside the camp. Dominic Reynolds has been talking to some of those still hoping to reach Britain.
People ate here, slept here, and dreamed of a better life here. But it was no one's dream to live here. And after standing for almost a year on the outskirts of Calais, the so-called jungle is coming down. These 3 friends are 14 and 15 and 3,000 miles from their parents. They made it to Calais from Eritrea. Thomas said he hoped it was true, that a new law means they can come to the UK.
If you go to England, we have aim, we learn, we have good future. If we go to
You have
England.
a good future.
Yeah. If not, we have not good future. We are children, but our life will destroy.
They were moved yesterday out of tents and into these shipping containers, designated safe spaces here for children. Once they were registered, they were lent a phone to call their mothers.
They cry when we call for them, and we also cry with them.
You cried when you talked to your mother?
Because we miss together. We don't see long time. Still now we cry if we remember them.
The queue to register outside the camp was tense at times. The children are supposed to have a line of their own, but not everyone's got to the front yet. Mohammed tried 3 times yesterday. He does have family in Britain. He says they paid to release him from an ISIS prison in Libya on his way here. He is 17.
In a prison underground, you don't have any food, any water. You drink your
urine?
Yeah. And it is day-to-day fighting for you.
He's confident his 8-month journey from Eritrea is about to end in Britain. If the British government says, no, you can't come to Britain, what will you do?
If it is I don't know. It's difficult for me. That day it is no good. You know, I think this I help you, no problem. The British.
You think they will definitely help? But this camp's being emptied fast. Waiting coaches have taken thousands of people already. And one charity has called for this whole process to stop so children can be evacuated first.
You know, we saw this happen in April where the southern part of the camp was demolished and 129 children went missing.
It's clear this process isn't about to stop. But there were still plenty of people in the camp this afternoon. Authorities here will be hoping everyone says goodbye to this place peacefully tonight. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News in Calais.
Still to come on the programme. Tragedy strikes at a theme park in Australia. And the bravery of this little boy who's been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. Those stories and more coming up after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News. At least 59 cadets and guards have been killed in an attack on a police college in Pakistan. 3 militants wearing suicide bomb vests entered the college late last night, reportedly taking hostages. A major security operation then lasted for hours and all of the attackers were killed. So-called Islamic State have claimed responsibility, as Catherine Jones explains.
These are the burnt-out remains of a dormitory where last night dozens of police cadets lay sleeping. Just before midnight, 3 masked attackers armed with grenades and Kalashnikovs burst in. They just barged in and started firing point blank, this cadet says. We started screaming and running around. Others spoke of jumping out of windows and hiding under beds as the gunmen rounded up hostages. The firefight with security forces lasted over 4 hours until 2 assailants detonated suicide vests and the third was shot dead. As Quetta Hospital was overwhelmed with the wounded, government officials blamed a militant group with ties to the Taliban. A second Taliban-linked group also claimed the attack. And several hours later, so-called Islamic State published a photo it said showed the 3 assailants, along with its own claim of responsibility for the atrocity. This afternoon, Pakistan's Prime Minister has visited the injured cadets. Already this year, more than 700 people have been killed in terror attacks here, despite a harsh crackdown on militant groups recently. Last night's attack shows just how vulnerable to terrorism Pakistan remains. Catherine Jones, 5 News.
In Australia, 2 men and 2 women have been killed on a ride at a theme park on the Gold Coast. A malfunction on the Thunder River Rapids ride at Dreamworld caused 2 of the victims to be ejected and 2 others to be caught inside. As Charlotte Grant reports, investigators are trying to determine the cause of what happened.
It's known as the biggest theme park in Australia, but now Dreamworld is at the centre of a major investigation, as police try to establish how this River Rapids ride could lead to 4 people losing their lives.
One of the rides have sustained some sort of malfunction, causing 2 people to be ejected from a ride. Another 2 people were caught inside the ride.
The accident's believed to have happened here as the ride was coming to an end. Each raft can carry up to 6 people at a time, but as they went onto a mechanical section of track, a raft flipped, trapping people inside. Dreamworld bosses have expressed their shock and closed the park until further notice.
We are deeply shocked and saddened, and our hearts and our thoughts go to the families involved.
This is how the ride is advertised by Dreamworld. It's seen as family-friendly, with children as young as 2 allowed on board. The victims, according to police, were in their 30s and 40s. But there have been concerns about safety before, with eyewitnesses saying just hours earlier the same ride had already broken down.
And the engineers had to come, they drained all the water out and then had to refill it back up, and then we were allowed to go. But yeah, we were stuck there for about 30-40 minutes at least.
Running for 3 decades, the River Rapids is one of Dreamworld's most popular rides. But now it is also its most deadly. Charlotte Grant, 5 News.
Now, a British Airways flight has been diverted after several members of its crew became ill. The flight from San Francisco to London was then diverted to Vancouver, and 25 crew members were sent to local hospitals. The airline hasn't elaborated on the cause of the problem or the symptoms, and it's not yet clear how many passengers were on board at the time. The chairman of Tesco has warned that food prices are very likely to rise as a result of Brexit. John Allen said the plunge in the value of the pound would have a knock-on impact on customers. Recently, Tesco had a high-profile dispute with Unilever after it tried to raise prices for things like Marmite and Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Next, the story of a brave little boy battling a rare form of lung cancer. When Dylan Askin was just 2 years old, his organs began to fail. At one point, he became so poorly, his parents and doctors prepared to switch off his life support. But before they did, he began to make what was a shock recovery, as Louise Beale explains now.
Little Dylan Askin is a very busy little boy. Seeing him play, you'd never know he's suffering from a very rare form of lung cancer. The 3-year-old first fell ill at Christmas last year. The cancer caused cysts to form in his lungs and nearly stopped him breathing. Doctors managed to stabilise him, but over the next few months he was in and out of hospital, and by Easter his mum and dad were told to say their goodbyes.
It was just awful, really. There's no way to describe it, I think. But we'd come to the point where I think on the Saturday morning we'd both agreed that if there was no chance for him, we didn't want him suffering.
But just as Dylan's life support was being switched off, Kerry saw him start to move. Doctors couldn't believe it, and after several weeks in intensive care, Dylan was back home playing with his brothers.
Saying goodbye and letting go, you kind of feel guilty about it because we feel like we kind of gave up on him. It's been hard, and we find ourselves crying in the supermarket or random places because we just catch Dylan doing stuff that a normal 3-year-old will be doing, and it's almost like he nearly wasn't doing this.
Dylan is still having chemotherapy, but his family hope when he finishes it in March he'll be clear of the cancer.
We often call him a miracle.
I mean, the head of PICU actually referred to him as a miracle, so when you've got a doctor referring to him as a miracle, it's pretty hard not to
say it. Yeah. I think he's in one of their top 10 recoveries of all time, isn't he?
Who's that?
Kerry and Mike say Dylan is a survivor who does everything in his own way. They now just hope he'll get completely better in his own time too. Louise Beale, 5 News.
What a great little boy. Lovely family as well, keeping everything crossed for them that the treatment goes well. Now, if I said Essex girl, what would you think? Unintelligent, materialistic, promiscuous? Well, believe it or not, that really is the English dictionary definition, nothing to do with us. Unsurprisingly, there is a petition to change that and have the term scrubbed out, with campaigners calling it a rude and out-of-date stereotype. Millie Stevenson has been to Essex to find out more.
Welcome to the world of reality TV show Towie, home to some of Britain's most famous so-called Essex girls. But it's an official definition which has got thousands extremely cross. In the words of the Collins Dictionary, and I quote, an Essex girl is a young working-class woman from the Essex area, typically considered as being unintelligent, materialistic, devoid of taste and sexually promiscuous. That's an appalling stereotype, says a new online campaign which is trying to get the definition as it stands removed from the dictionary. Towie star Danny Armstrong told me she's proud to be an Essex girl, but does not agree with the dictionary's description.
What do you think about this argument? Some people say that, reality TV shows, do they reinforce stereotypes? What would you say to that?
I think with reality TV shows, you've got to understand that's just a group, a small minority
of people in Essex that have got together and created a fun TV show. It's entertainment. We play a little bit on that character. Yes, we're glamorous, we like to look good, but not everyone in Essex is what you call, say, a Towie girl.
So I want to find out what Essex girls make of this dictionary definition and being labelled as unintelligent, materialistic and devoid of taste. So I've come to Brentwood in Essex. Armed with a dictionary, I want to find out whether people here think that definition is fair. What do you think about that? Rubbish.
That's appalling, isn't it?
Untrue. A load of old...
Not true.
Family show, sir?
Yeah.
Rubbish.
Rubbish. Load of old... Right. Not all the girls are like that.
Not good.
No?
Well, the young bit was all right, but the rest of it wasn't. Stick with that.
How would you like to define an Essex girl in real life?
Tough.
Yeah.
Independent.
Someone that's not tangerine, has a brain cell.
The feeling here in Brentwood, though, is clear. Don't judge a book by its cover. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News, Essex.
That's it for now, though. I'll be back at 6:30 with 5 News tonight. We'll be discussing the 30-second chat that could help tackle the obesity crisis. The studies found that GPs who challenge patients about their weight, even if that wasn't the reason they were visiting their doctor, help them shed the pounds. That's in an hour's time. Charlotte Welby, though, has the weather next. I'll see you again for 5 News tonight at 6:30. Bye-bye for now.